Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together Newlywed Edition. Today we're going to be talking about the homeschool purpose and kind of, rekindling and between the two of us and kind of testing and seeing what our purpose is. And we're going to, each of us have come up with a list of purposes that we feel are the reason we do homeschooling. And it might be a nice way for us to kind of reconnect this year as we were talking about it a lot this morning. We have a very busy year coming up, with our daughter starting the parent partnership. We were talking about our youngest possibly going into a little preschool at the end of the year.
For a couple days a week.
And so we're starting to get into this, we got children. We ain't got babies anymore.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's a good time, as we're getting ready to embark on the new year, it's a good time to talk about why we homeschool, because there's difficult days and it's good to remind us. So the newlywed joke is because we don't know the answers that each other have given, because we've been married for 11 years now. So
yeah, but we've been together for 16.
Yeah. So
God.
Yeah, we're not newlyweds.
What's going on?
But so we're gonna see what we come up with. But before that, if you could head down into the show notes and check out all of our links to social media, connect with us. Please leave us an iTunes review. We would super appreciate that.
Do you see that, guys? She did my stuff. But that's the kind of a connection that we have after 16 years. But she just realized, I saw her, she was struggling through it. And she's realizing it's not that easy to be the MC of the podcast.
I stepped outside my zone.
You stepped outside your zone and you realized, skills are learned. This is a skilled job.
All right, host.
All right. So, ladies first. Beauty before brawn. You get to go first. What was your first purpose?
All right. So my first purpose for homeschooling is to build close family connections. So that's parents to...
Look at that. Number one on my list, too.
Oh, man. See?
So how many points do we get? It was like 25 points?
Yeah, the points don't matter, right?
Points
like
don't matter.
Whose line is it anyway? So, this is about building close relationships, not only between us and our children, which I think is just the purpose in life, right, is to have this close relationship with these little humans that we've made and love, but for them to have close relationship to each other. I know when we decided to have a second, I was very concerned. So Matthew has one sibling and I am an only child. And so I don't know anything about sibling dynamics, but of all the friends that I know, there's some of them get along and they have close relationships with their sister or brother, and others are barely on speaking terms. And I was really concerned about that. And one of the things that gave me solace was that I thought, with homeschooling, we're going to build such a closer relationship than we would have if the girls were in a normal school. And I loved when we interviewed Jordan Anderson, and she talked about that ultra close relationship with her brother. And it was like balm to my heart, because the last thing that I want, we decided to have a second child so that our daughter would have a lifelong friend. And for, if they grow up and they're not close, and not that we can completely dictate that, but that would be so sad. That was the whole reason she would have a playmate, a friend. And I think with homeschooling, we're going to build a close connection between them.
I agree. For me, the family has always been a big thing for us. We've talked about this, I think, the first night we were together, right? At the Denny's, we're going to turn this into the rom-com.
Oh gosh. Let's not talk about the meet cute.
The meet cute. Yeah. We'll take a little side note. I almost buried the entire relationship because I launched an early dad joke at Arial. We were in line And then she was in front of me and they said, "Hey, Matt, can you see?" And I said, "No, it's all right. I have an aerial view."
And that's when I knew he was the one, folks. That's when I knew this one's a keeper.
Guys, that one's for free. You can take that one.
He was 21 and he already had the dad joke. Just totally.
She knew this guy is husband material. No, okay, so we'll dial it back. So, yeah, family's been the big thing for me. And I think that was something we talked a lot about, that we wanted to have kind of like a really close family together. My family, my dad went to school when I was younger, and, there was a lot of this kind of felt like a single mother household. And then my dad would come back from school. And so
medical school.
Yeah. And so I always remembered enjoying the time that we were together. And so that, for me, that was something that was important. That was something we talked about when we began, that, we want to really make sure that we spend a lot of time together. And I think, that was the idea, but, like a lot of times we have these ideas when we're younger and we don't really know what we're talking about. We think we know what we're talking about at 20 something years old, but we really don't.
We really didn't.
Yeah. We're starting to get a little crotchety here, get off my lawn, old man type of stuff. But,
approach 40.
But as you approach older, you do understand that wisdom is there when you're older. And as we came through our late 20s and early 30s, when we were working and we had our careers and everything like that, and when you're starting to crank through 60, 70 hours a week working, all the hours of the night, you wake up to go to the bathroom, you got to check your email, those type of things in the tech world, that wasn't sustainable, but we didn't have any kids at that time, so it was okay. But also,
I don't really think it was okay even then.
It wasn't okay. Yeah, really. I still have PTSD from it. But, it was, I think we learned a lot of lessons then. And I think we learned a lot of lessons because we were lucky enough to not have kids then, because I don't think it would have been a good experience for them at the time. But we saw other people, you do the people watching at work, and you see hey, they're alone. The kids are at preschool all day long, and that's not something we wanted.
Or they're in preschool care, right? So before school care, then they're in school,
and then
they're in after school care. Their parents pick them up. They're both working, and we knew that we knew that this wasn't the life we wanted, and so we made that. We were fortunate to be able to make the sacrifice so that you could come home and stay home full time.
And that was my life when I was younger. My mom would drop me off at Latchkey at 6 a.m, and then she would pick me up at Latchkey at 6 p.m, and so it was a 12-hour day. And then you slap public school in between there and have to do all my homework, and then come home, make dinner, and go to bed, right? And so that was your life for a number of years.
Family time.
Well, not that I'm not criticizing that, because that was what they needed to do, but we had the choice to not have to do that, right. And so we did angle ourselves a lot in that direction. And there's always that line. It's kind of crude, but on nobody's tombstone does it say, "I wish I spent more hours at the office doing more work."
Right. Absolutely.
They always say, "I wish I would have spent more time with my family."
Yeah.
And so, for me, I take that to heart, and I think that's a big driver of why we not only waited to have children, and then prepared ourselves for children. We always joked, we had everything on the spreadsheet, and
we're such planners.
We're such
nerds.
But a lot of people kind of went, ha 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 ha, you don't know. But no, we actually executed to that plan, and we were, I think we have a pretty good relationship on the planning element, and then, we execute to that, and that was really important. And so that all kind of flowed into it. Okay, when we have children, we're going to be ready to take the hit of one of us staying home for it, and we've always talked about me being that person. So even from day one, that was our idea that we wanted to kind of do.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. I think number one on my list right here, family, being together after years of working and grinding. I didn't want to miss out on their youth. And that was a big thing for me. And I think, in all the terribleness of this year, I think there's a kind of a silver lining is that
definitely.
you've been here, because I don't want to say you missed out, but you weren't, didn't have the day-to-day thing that I had with our oldest, but you've had that with our youngest. And I think that's been kind of a blessing this year for you, that you didn't have to, we've made a lot of changes in the last couple of years. We moved, we got a new house, we got moved closer to your work,
A guy got a new job,
got a
the
new
whole
job,
thing.
we got all
yeah.
the new stuff.
We,
So
we made a lot of changes
we
for
made a
our
lot
family
of
life.
quality of life changes.
Yeah, I used to have a very long commute. It was like an hour and a half in the morning, and it could be kind of up to 2 hours at night. And it had gotten to that point where it was really bad. And
Well,
we
when
realized,
we first moved to Seattle, it was normal, but
well, yeah.
then everybody else moved to Seattle. It became abnormal.
So I think that making those changes for quality of life, and it's good. It's
Yeah.
good to remember that this is top
Yep.
of both of our lists.
Okay,
So what's your next one?
my next one, number 2, is the freedom to travel and vacation without the requirements of the school schedule.
You know what? I think that's also very important, but it didn't make my list.
You didn't make your list.
You know what?
We talk about it all the time.
I know we do. I don't know. I feel like in this pandemic era, I can't even think about travel, but I love travel. But you're right. The freedom and flexibility.
You got to come into me. You got to get the monkey brain. It's got to kick back in. We got to get to the post-pandemic mindset, right? So for me, travel is, we've always talked about this, being able to go places and see things when everybody else is sitting in the school grind, when they're, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, whatever it is, we having the ability for us to, go do some traveling, get in the car, do a road trip, a long weekend, do camping, things of that nature. You can't do that when you're in the public school. And
Yeah.
and that's not a knock on people who, obviously some people need to use the public school and that's their thing. But that's something that we always talked about is, to have that ability to say, hey, let's go to the museum on a Tuesday when it's like nobody's there, and you have the freedom to kind of roam around and explore and see things,
Yeah.
the freedom to go hiking on trails that nobody's on because it's a weekday, and
Right.
being able
Well,
to do all these activities.
and being gone a number of days from school, right? I know a coworker that I worked with. He wanted to take his daughters on this amazing trip to Greece, but it was going to put them a couple of days over their maximum unexcused absences for the year. It was this incredibly educational trip he wanted to take them on, and it was like he actually couldn't go. They had to shorten their trip so that they wouldn't conflict with the public school, and it was just it was sad, right? That and I thought, wow, I'm so glad we're not going to deal with
and
that.
we used to talk about this with when we used to live in Florida, because in Florida, dirty secret, there are good times to go to the amusement parks in Orlando.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And the locals know those times. Yes.
I don't know. Those times are becoming
It's becoming
because
different.
it's such a worldwide destination
Yeah.
now that
But
it's hard.
back in the day, way in the Wayback Machine,
We're so old.
we're so old.
No.
Back in the day when we used to live there, January, February was the time the locals all went to the parks,
Mhm.
and we always talked about that, like, well, we couldn't do that if we had kids in public school.
Right.
That was one of the things we always kind of talked about, and I think that kind of was that beginning of of us talking about being able to travel things. And then one of my aunts did that road trip with their kids in the Winnebago, and they went out to the Midwest and they went out to the
Didn't they
plains.
do like dinosaur
Yeah, they did
digs
dinosaur
and
digs.
stuff?
And we kind of thought, we remember us talking about that, going, man, that was such a cool trip for those kids. They'll never forget that. And I'm thinking inside my head, I'm like, well, if we homeschool, we
Sure.
can do that whenever we want.
Mhm.
And so those are kind of the ideas that I had. So what's your number?
That's absolutely true.
What's your next one on your list?
So the next one on my list is to ensure that our daughters have and never lose their love of learning.
Oh, look at that one. We're good. Creating lifelong learners.
Yeah. So I think this is a big one for me. You and I both, right? We love to learn. I've always loved to learn. I've always been a kind of a teacher's pet type of kid. I loved being at school. I loved learning.
And I have a new hobby every 3 days.
Right. Yeah. So you always loved learning. But for me, at some point, in the public school system, and you even in private school, right? The books that they kind of forced you to read, the work, it became. I really lost that joy, that natural joy, and it took me. I mean, I don't even think I had that through college. It took me post college, really meeting you and learning things together with you, really reinvigorated my love of learning. But I would say from maybe junior high to the end of college, I didn't really enjoy learning. I did it because I needed to do it.
But you didn't realize it, like in the moment. You didn't realize that.
No.
You were just trying to get things done. You didn't read books for pleasure
I
anymore.
never read a book for fun past
then
elementary school.
And then you started reading for pleasure again, and it kind of like, it was just an explosion.
Right.
But
yeah.
the idea that I think really codified this with us is we saw a lot of like my cousins and some younger kids who used to read a ton and then they would say, I don't read anymore. And in that moment, they were like, oh yeah, because I'm really busy and I got all these things. I'm like, but I remember you used to just crank through a book a day, right?
Yeah, they love to
They
read,
love to
and
read.
they love to learn, and
Like,
now they were so busy.
Yeah, and then I said, well, why don't you just pick up a book on the weekend? No, I don't want to do it anymore. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, we always kind of step back and go, man, I don't, because at that moment we had kind of refound that love of learning and reading and all those type of things. And we kind of like, as we got older, we kind of looked back and said, wow, look at these younger kids. They're not enjoying what they're doing.
Yeah.
And we had that kind of that moment, I think, in our late 20s where we kind of said, hey, this is something that's important. We need to start thinking about this, especially for our kids. This is something we don't want to happen to them. Now, it's not to say that they are going to, if you could send your kid to school, you'd be public school or a private school or whatever, that they wouldn't have the love for learning. There's nobody saying that. But we did see a lot of that. And that was just something we saw and we also saw it in ourselves too. We looked back, once we saw that happening, we said, wow, I had that same thing happen to me. And I went to private school in high school. You went to public school. So we had both experiences and we both had the same problem. And then we looked through college and we said, man, I never had time to read for pleasure. I never had time to pick up books or to try to explore something else because I had, 500 physics problems I had to do for the week, or you had to do like, I'm looking at it. No, you got rid of most of your books, but yeah, I mean, you had to do millions of problems and we had to do all these projects.
I did start, it wasn't until Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings became big things. So kind of in college, and that's when I started reading for pleasure again. And I did read a bit through college and start to kind of ramp that up. But I did. I know it waxes and wanes, right? And kids get busy, and junior high and high school are such difficult transitionary periods in your life.
Sure.
But I when I look back, I can kind of remember the classes that killed my love of reading because I always looked forward in elementary school to the books they assigned us to read because they were all so good, right? I read The Secret Garden, we read Hatchet, we read just a bunch of just classic, wonderful books, right? And then I got into junior high and then into high school when the books became just, they were kind of like a drudgery. I don't know if they were chosen by a board or what, but they weren't good books. And so, yeah. So anyway, lifelong learners, kindling and keeping the fire going of their love of learning. So what's your next one?
My next one is, so for me, this is kind of something that I think is really important to something that I've learned later in life is the idea of critical thinking, but also the idea of deep focus. So being able to both take in information, use the tools in your tool belt to understand or analyze, but also to challenge yourself to, dive into a subject you maybe never have learned about. Like I think we're all of us have become, armchair epidemiologists over the last 9 months, right? And that, that's the case of a wide popular issue or whatnot. But what if you're reading some Star Trek book or something like that, and they talk about a concept that the trolley scenario.
They're talking about antimatter
antimatter,
that was
and
on
you go,
the science show the other day.
Well, great. I want to go learn a little bit more about that, and being able to have the ability to have the critical thinking skills, the ability and the tools in your tool belt to go find the information, to learn, to find trustworthy sources, to read those sources, and then to pull that information into your own inner understanding. And how to do that is a lifelong skill that is not built overnight. And that is something that really needs to be done. And I feel that's something that I still struggle with, right? I still have to really be thoughtful on how you think and how you research and how you learn, and to not let emotional things or things that people tell you are truth, and being able to pick and choose through those things. I think that's a skill, especially in nowadays, is a skill that I think is really important. But then also the idea of deep focus. So that goes back to kind of that lost love of learning, lost love of reading type of thing, and being able to sit down and have somebody sit and read for 4 hours. That's not something people can do these days. And that's something that there's been kind of a movement back to, this idea of deep focus, being able to dive in and focus on something for a long period of time. You see this with kids a lot of times. Our oldest will sit there and play with, her little people for an hour and a half and just act and have voices and play with those things. That is a level of deep focus that most people don't have, right? We have these horrible, little brick boxes that we're all attached to that are in our pockets. And, it breaks our focus all the time. And then being able to sit there and put that away and be able to focus on something, I think is a powerful skill. So being able to focus on things and also having all the tools in the tool belt, I think are great skills for children, or are great skills that I want my kids to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's going to benefit them going forward. So I don't know if that one's on your list.
No, not on my list, but I think it's interesting what you say about deep focus, because when we did our episodes, if you go back and look at the episodes of Am I Doing Enough, and we talked about kindergarten, first and second grade, the amount of
shifting and
shifting and movement there doesn't allow them to really get deep into anything.
Not at all.
So I think that's a good one. That's a really good one.
So what's your next one?
Okay, so mine is to let our children have a childhood, not a stressful school homework life that feels more like work of adulthood.
I've got one on there that's sort of like that, yes. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I think we're seeing this trend, and some communities are going, and not having homework at all anymore, which is kind of an interesting pendulum shift. But
yeah.
We've been seeing this trend of longer school days and more homework, so that, and then kids have the extracurriculars, which they have passions around. And so they're spending so much time doing these, and it's so stressful that we're seeing very young children having, I've seen just an explosion, even in people that I know.
Panic and anxiety.
And I come from a background of having lots of problems with anxiety, and I've really worked hard, and there's been a lot of therapy and things to get over that anxiety, and it just kills me to see anxiety in children this young. They should be out after school playing and having fun, but yet they're doing homework. We for a while there, you coached basketball. This was 5th grade boys basketball, so they were 10 to 11 years old, something like that. And these boys would get to you at practice at like 7 p.m.
And this will be their second sport they just went to. They had a practice for another sport just before this.
Some of them did, and some of them didn't. But the ones that didn't, I remember these kids telling you'd get them, and they were just like, they were like hooligans. They were wild. And you would say, like, you would ask the question, and basically they had not played all day. They'd been at school. They'd done inside stuff at lunch, so they had not been out to play. When they got home from school, they had so much homework, and then they had to get dinner, and then they had to get to practice, and they were going to go home and have bath and bed. It was like the amount of stress in their lives. One of the silver linings, and we weren't super busy, but for other families, we've got some families on our street that are very busy. There's a family with 4 children on our street, 4 or 5 children, and they were telling me we've never been this free, right? And I know homeschoolers can often make ourselves busy too, because we have the time to be involved in lots of things.
Make ourselves busy, yeah.
But if we see that the stress is overtaking our children, then we can pull that back, right? If you've got kids that are in school and then have 2 hours of homework every night, just the stress that's piling on them, and I want our kids to have a childhood. So what is yours look like? It's a little bit different?
No, I had the same thing. So we all know with the Common Core, there's been a big mentality switch within the schools to test, to teach to the test. So there's the testing mentality that is very stressful. They also have the exorbitant amount of homework. We've seen that for years. I know it's kind of the pendulum swinging slowly back in the other direction, which is good. But, I remember when I was in high school, and this was in the 90s, right? The late 90s, I would have school. So I went to private school, but I had to drive to private school, and it was a long distance. So it was an hour to go from my house to my private school. And then I would be at school. I had to get there early, and then I would be at school all day. And then after that, I would have to do all my homework, after practice, because, varsity practice when I was basketball didn't start till a little bit later. So I had some time to do my homework. Then I had basketball practice, and then I would drive home. Well, I wouldn't be home until like 9 o'clock at night. I hadn't eaten dinner. So then I would eat a little bit of dinner, do my homework, and go to bed at like 10:30, 11 o'clock. And that was my high school life. Like, that was my life. And I was like, that I don't want that for my kids, because it was a lot of stress. And then when we had away games, which was pretty often, and I played golf as well, I wouldn't be back to school until midnight, 1:00, and then I had to drive home an hour. That was my life. And then I saw other kids through the 2000s where, my cousins complaining about having 2-3 hours of homework a night. And then we, the kids that we were talking with and the parents we were talking with during that time period, they would all say, 2-3 hours of homework a night. And
one of my friends whose children were in junior high said, he goes, oh, well, thank goodness the teacher said they would give no more than a half hour of homework per night. And I said, oh, great. Well, half hour's not much. He goes, yeah, per class. So it's not too bad.
4 or 5 classes. Yeah.
I'm like, no, that's a problem. That's a problem.
And that kind of dovetails with the being with the family type of thing. So I had testing mentality, 3 hours of homework a night issues, and then performance stress. And we talked about this.
That's a big one.
Being able to, a lot of people piling things on like activities and extracurriculars and all this type of stuff on top of school, on top of homework, on top of testing, on top of like, I got to make my grades, on top of getting ready for college. And it becomes this like soul crushing performance anxiety. Mm-hmm. And I never wanted that to happen with our kids. And I wanted to have it's not like they're not going to learn. Right. And this is another concept that we've been talking about a little bit lately, is the idea of there's paralysis, because there's so many opportunities out there. There's so many curriculums. There's so many books. There's so many activities. There's so many extracurriculars. And we all look at our kids and we say, well, we want these kids to be successful, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and, wealthy, business people. And we want them to be successful in their lives. And we think, because we're adults, my gosh, they've got to do the right thing. They got to navigate this complex world, and I got to give them all these activities and all these, opportunities. And if they're not into STEM at 6 years old, they're not going to be a STEM person. It's like, whew, I feel that pressure too, right? Like I have to understand my mentality is, when I was 7 or 8, I wasn't thinking about STEM stuff. I wasn't thinking about science stuff. I was just having fun.
I didn't do anything science until high school, and I'm an engineer.
And so, I know. So,
right?
Yeah. So, I have to really just calm down. I have to remember back when I was a kid, when I was in middle school or I was in elementary school, I wasn't stressing about all my math homework. I was playing baseball.
You get home and you'd play.
It was fun. And
I remember when I was pregnant.
I think as parents, I've talked to you about this a couple of times where I feel there's.
Am I doing enough for her?
Yeah, there's a paralysis of choice, and you almost want to say, I want to collapse this down so that it's an easier selection, because you do feel this pressure as a parent that you have to do everything. And it's not the case. And I have to keep telling myself that. And so like, if you don't collapse those options down, your anxiety for your children's future will be just projected on top of them. And the last thing you want to do is say, okay, you've got to do all this homeschool. You got to then go do all these STEM extracurriculars. You got to do the horse riding camp. Then you got to be in band. Then you got to play 4 sports. and on top of that, you need 200 hours of community service every year. So that looks really good on the college application. It's like, just take a deep breath.
I love that we have the ability though, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that we won't at some point maybe go too far thinking that our daughter wants to do, all these activities and then maybe go too far, but at least we have the option. I remember when I was pregnant, I went to a breastfeeding support group, and one of the moms was talking beforehand about one of her older children, and she said she was so heartbroken because she could not find a weekend baseball league that only had practices and games on the weekends. And she said her second grader was just dying to play baseball. Yeah. And I think it was baseball. Maybe it was basketball. She wanted something that was only weekend based. And they were like, well, there's plenty of leagues if he wants to play. I mean, it's weekday. And she goes, he has so much homework every night as a second grader that he can't play a sport. So, and I know that we may go overboard at some point, and I'm sure it will happen to everybody, and then we'll have to dial it back. But at least we have the option. Yeah. At least we can say, our schedule is our own, and maybe we've overscheduled ourselves and we'll back down. Mm-hmm. But if you're in school and then you have the homework component on top of it, you can't do that. Yeah. I mean, I've heard of parents writing. I've talked to parents before who've written to teachers and said, my child's not turning in this assignment because this is just too much work and that kind of thing. And that never goes over very well.
No, it doesn't.
right? Because there are expectations to be met. How does, and for teachers to see it on their side, how do they deal with that? They've got, requirements that they need to meet. So this is a real tough one, but this is one that was important. So let
No,
them
I
have a
agree.
childhood.
So do you have any? You and I have agreed with about 4 or 5 of these items. Do you have anything on your list that I don't have on there?
I have a couple things.
You
So
said 5.
no,
I put 5.
well, I had 7. I said
She added an extra one.
well, I don't know. I said come
Teacher's
up with
pet.
a few.
I'm not the teacher here. I don't want your apple.
Listen. So so one of mine is to give our children enough experiences and opportunities to discover what they want to do for their career.
Yes.
So Matthew has a cousin who is extremely smart. He's in his 5th year of college, I think. So super smart, wonderful kid. Did lots of extracurricular activities. Straight A student. Went to college. I mean, just like a wonderful kid. And now young man. But the problem is he was so busy with school and other things that he didn't get to discover what he actually wanted to do. And so now he's in his 5th year of college trying to figure it out.
I think he's finally figuring it out. Like he's doing kind of a biology, criminology
But
thing.
he still doesn't know exactly what he wants to do when he gets out. And I think one of the things that I wanted out of homeschool was the ability to give our daughters the time to say, you're interested in being a vet. This is one of the things, okay? So his cousin was interested in potentially being a veterinarian. So he went and he interned at a vet. Well, he did this as a junior in college. We could do this with our child as a sophomore in high school and say, hey, do an unpaid internship at a vet and maybe learn you don't want to be a vet, which is what he ended up figuring out that wasn't right for him. But so giving them the experiences to figure out what they want to do for their career so that their college or technical school or whatever they want to do is not wasted, that was important to me. And I don't think they're going to get that opportunity.
We've talked about
busy in school.
Yeah, we've talked about this. We've had a number of conversations on this where, the fact that we can do homeschooling gives them the opportunity to have internships or job, working experience during their high school years or their elementary years, or having that experience earlier in their life can help, you're right, hone what they're interested in. But also on top of that, I think another skill that, I hope to pass on, and I think this will be it as well, is that even if you do your high school, you work hard, you go to college, you get that, degree in whatever that job field is, understand that that doesn't have to be the end all. And I think that's something that I think a lot of high school kids don't get told, or the kids going into college, they think this is it. I'm going to be a business administrative person, or I'm going to be a political science person, or I'm going to be an engineer for the rest of my life. And that is not the case. Like, I went to school to be a physicist. I wanted to be a high energy physicist, and I ended up becoming a regular material physicist. And then I became an electrical engineer, and then I became a marketing requirements definition for hardware and software. And then I just became a marketing person for hardware, not outbound, but inbound, creating hardware, telling developers what to develop. That became a passion of mine. And then the process of building software. So I went from studying particle physics to developing software. And now I'm a stay-at-home dad, right? And all of that within since 2001, so literally 20 years. That's the arc in 20 years. I've had half a dozen jobs. I worked at NASA. I actually did science. I did original science work in a lab there. I made the arc, and none of that pertained. Most of my professional life had nothing to do with what I went to college for.
Yeah, it's true.
And that is a normal, direction in life. And that is, I think, happens more often than most people, understand. Like, for example, you went to school to be an ocean engineer.
Yeah, I have a marine engineering degree.
And marine engineer. And now you're building medical equipment. You're a project manager for a medical company. And it's
right.
like that is...
I'm very happy doing it.
And very happy doing it. And
it's not like I got pushed into something I didn't want to do. But it's so hard to know, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard to know when
and
you
they
turn
think there's
18.
this... And they think there's the finality of it, right? That, okay, I'm going to go become a lawyer, right? And I will be a lawyer for the rest of my life.
Well, and what type of law, right? I'm going to become this kind of criminal justice lawyer. And they end up going into patent law and being really happy with that, right? So I think but the opportunity by homeschooling and by setting our own schedule and our own workload, we can see interests our kids might have
Mm-hmm.
and explore them with our children so that they can determine maybe a little bit sooner and at least, not go completely out of left field, right?
Yeah.
It's easier on their time, their budget, their life if they don't have to go to college twice because they didn't know what direction they wanted to go.
And if you're a person who doesn't embrace, lifelong learning, and that's a skill you want to cultivate, this is a great opportunity to do it with your children, because along the path, your children are going to become really interested in things. They are going to become, deeply passionate. Like, our daughter could become, a software coder in like 3 or 4 years, right? Wanting to play with Arduino kits, wanting to do Raspberry Pi stuff, wanting to do, Python coding, whatever it might be. And I'm there to help her. But she could also be interested in art. And I could be right there with her, getting the tablets, doing the canvas painting, doing the classes with her, right? Being able to help be there with her and be a mentor parent that says, this is a great idea. Let's go together with this. I don't think that's something you can do if you didn't homeschool. And I think that's...
Are you seeing ahead on my list, Booza?
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's what I have. Re-experience learning with my children.
I see the reflection in your eyes, the glint. Yeah.
I mean, this is exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about, right? There were so many things that we didn't learn in school,
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm loving relearning with my child. She's very interested in Egypt, and so we read lots and lots of books about ancient Egypt. And I have learned so much, and this is one of,
It's unbelievable.
I mean, this is a selfish purpose, I guess, for homeschooling, but I love to learn and I want to do it with her. I want to experience that. We want to experience that with her. And it's true of homeschooling when your children are studying something, the whole family, it takes over your life for that time,
Exactly.
right? Everyone is studying it, learning about it, which I think is great. So many parents have said with the pandemic that their children are doing Zoom school and they never really realized, they never knew all of what their kids really did at school, what they were learning. They were kind of disconnected, especially if their kids had no problem getting their homework done by themselves. It was, you went to school today. How was your day at school? It was good. Do you have any homework? Yep, I already got it done. Okay, great. Right there. There's not, and we've asked our daughter too when she comes home from preschool, what'd you do at preschool today? I don't know. Right. I'm sure she had a great time. I'm sure she was learning valuable things, but we weren't a part of that. So I wanted to be a part of it and get to learn those things too. And so that's just,
yeah, it's
right with what you were saying.
Yeah, and they kind of go together. So, Ariel, do you have anything else on your list?
I do. I'm sorry. I guess I overachieved on this list thing. Okay, so this one was important to me, which was to protect our children from bullying and adverse relationships. So this is, obviously bullying from other children, but there can be bullying from, there can be poor adult relationships. I've had in my past a couple of teachers that actually weren't good people, and that happens in every profession, I'm sure, right? It's not unique to them, but those were not good relationships, and it's really hard. My parents tried to switch classes for me, and some different things happened, and it's real hard to work within that framework of the public school. Of how do you, I was very badly bullied when I was in junior high. And how do we get her? I had actually had my entire class load switched in junior high because of bullying. And so to me, it's one of those where I can look back and remember how helpless my parents felt, that there was really nothing that they could do. They talked with the superintendent, they talked with the principal, they got my classes switched, but that didn't protect me at lunchtime, right? And there wasn't much that they could really, there weren't a lot of levers for them to pull. And then in high school, when some things happened with a teacher and a kind of a bullying situation with a teacher relationship, they actually were not able to switch my classes, and the school administration wouldn't. And so I just remember how helpless they felt, and I didn't ever want to feel that way. I didn't ever want our children to be subjected to a relationship with a child or with an adult that wasn't healthy for them. And it's funny, we talked to my father the other day, and he said, well, but she's got to be prepared for there to be, there could be bullies in life, right? There can be people, and we were talking about in our jobs, we worked both at offices. There was people that, you didn't maybe like to work with because they were kind of grumpy or they were generally not team players, but people didn't like openly bully one another at our offices,
Yeah,
right?
they
It's
didn't
not
like spill coffee on you and like give you wedgies and put your head in the toilet and stuff like that.
yeah, I mean that just didn't that's just not how people interact. Yeah, you've got, oh yeah, that guy's always grumpy. I hate going to talk to him about
Yeah.
getting something done. But it's
Yeah.
not like it's not personal, and if there was, that's an HR issue.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not, you have recourse, but our children don't have recourse, and they're trying to be better about bullying in schools. And I
Yeah.
know there's lots of initiatives and things, but I felt so strongly that didn't help me as a person.
We're not. I think what you're saying is wonderful, but I don't think we're delusional in the idea that our child's never going to encounter a bully or never going to encounter bullying behavior. Of course they are.
We've already had it happen, right? You said that the other day.
Yeah, we've already had it happen once, twice
with kids on the street.
Some kids around the area, and then maybe in one of our activities, one of our gymnastics activity, we had an issue as well.
Right.
And so, listen, it's going to happen. And those are moments to have conversations. But the fact that you're able to be there, you're able to see and interact, you're able to pull them out of the situation, use it as an educational experience to your child, not only on, that is not allowed to be done to you. You have to tell me when that happens, but also you do not do that to other people as well. Right. So it's a great opportunity for you to educate there. And yeah, the last thing I would want her to do is like to dread, like on top of everything we've talked about, to then dread going to school every day.
Right.
And that is like, that's that's on top of all that with the pressure and the education and the homeschool, the homework, to then go into school and to dread going to school every day. I mean, that is not something we'd ever want to happen. And we have the power. We made the choice. We're making the active choice to not have all those type of things happen. We're not saying that public school is a terrible thing.
No, not at all. But there's so much that's not in your control.
And I don't want to be the parent that, is the helicopter parent. And we're not, right? We're not the helicopter parents. We're not sitting here trying to like protect them from every little thing. I want my daughter to fall and scrape her knee. I want, I watched the youngest fall off the couch and I'm like, she's not bleeding. She's all right. That type of stuff. Like
we want them to have experiences.
We want them to have all these experiences.
And experiences with dealing with, when we did have an issue with some other children and leaving her behind.
I want to pile up good experiences so that when they have the bad experiences, that they know how to handle those.
Well, and then we give her the tools. Yeah. We were present with that, right? So we knew exactly when this one situation happened. We knew when it happened. We helped her to figure out how to deal with it, and helped her work through it. But it's not like she's stuck in a classroom with a kid that bullies her every day and there's nothing we can do about that, right? I mean, if she's in an enrichment activity and there's a kid there that's not a good relationship for her and we're not able to get it dealt with, then we will just pull her out.
Yeah.
Right? We have that power.
We're very blessed that we're in a country that allows us to have the opportunity to homeschool. And we know there are countries out there that don't allow that. And, not having that ability to remove your child from something that is a bad situation must be the most heart-wrenching thing on the planet.
It's got to be just not to be able to protect your child. I think that's terrible. And for us too, we're so close to these situations when they happen that we can assess, is this a situation she needs to learn how to work through? Yeah. Because, adversity is something that everyone needs to learn how to overcome and deal with difficult situations.
The situation,
or is this unhealthy?
Yeah, the situation doesn't go from a momentary uncomfortable situation to something that's perpetually agonizing. And it's okay to have bad experiences. That's a good thing. Like right. we all get that.
We have to, and she has to learn. They have to learn.
But perpetual agony, and I know that you went through that on a daily basis, is something that we have the power to control that. I'm okay if my daughter has a bad experience with a kid on the street, or has a bad experience with a kid at an enrichment activity. That's okay. I'm okay with that. But I'm there. I can respond to it, and then I can stop it. Right. So that's a momentary thing. And then I can use that as a teaching moment. That's a very good thing to have happen, because then she can learn about what's good and what's bad. But if she's in a situation where she is just dreading the day to day, that is something I just can't handle. I cannot allow that to happen because I have the power to stop it. And if I don't stop it, then that's on me. And so I agree with you. That is a big thing. I wasn't bullied in school because I looked like an adult since I was 10.
You're giant.
I was enormous. So I didn't have that problem. I did. Actually, I did. I was bullied when I was in like first and second grade because I looked like a sixth grader. So the sixth graders bullied me. That was only one. It was like 1 year. And after that, I was just so big, nobody picked on me. But that's the benefits of genetics, but who knows? But I and you've talked about your experience, and that is not something I'd ever want. I wouldn't want any kid to go through that.
No, certainly not.
Let alone your own kids, right? So I absolutely agree with you. I think this whole exercise has been really good, and I think you mentioned that you want to encourage our listeners to do this with.
Yes. So now it's your turn. Sit down with your partner, spouse.
So as much as we talked about not doing homework.
Oh, that's right.
We're giving you some homework.
That's right. So we would encourage you to do this exercise. Before we talked today, Matt and I had not seen each other's lists, and I think it's important, even if your partner or spouse is not actively involved in homeschool, but they're the primary working, and to be on the same page and to realize that these are the common goals you have. We're going to be talking about how to set goals for this next year soon. And I think this is a great precursor conversation to how to set goals. I don't think you can really achieve a goal without understanding the purpose behind it, the why of it. So we encourage you to do this, and maybe you might learn something insightful. And I've learned some insightful things today, actually, just talking with you. Even though we talk about homeschool all the time, there's still some things I didn't really think about, the focus and the critical thinking. And I'm like, I agree with you. I hadn't thought about it. And these are the things that will carry us on the days when this is really hard.
Yeah. Well,
and you're thinking it would be so much easier if we could go have them go to school, and a teacher could teach them.
So I've had those hard moments where I've said, well, maybe I need to go back to work.
Right, we've talked about it. And every time we talk about these reasons,
I go through the thought experiment. Okay, I'm back at work. I'm working 65 hours a week. I'm on phone calls with India at night. I'm on phone calls with the Euro dev team in the morning, and I'm working all day, and I'm on my phone all the time, and I'm taking calls, and I'm like, that's not what I want. I don't want that.
Well, right. And I'm going to, we talked, so I'd go to work early and you'd go to work late. So we wouldn't see each other in the morning. So one of us could drop the kids. The other one would pick up the kids. Right. But we'd probably have to do after school care. And it's like.
And for what? Dollars and cents. That's really
because we're fortunate enough that we don't need the second income. We can survive on the single income, which we are so blessed to be able to do. So, but it's just it's these experiments are good, and we encourage you to talk with your spouse and
if you really want to get fun, put a couple beers in me, and I'll start doing some conspiracy theory stuff.
About the education system. Let's not go there, folks.
That's podcasting after dark. It's in the morning, so
take the homework over the holidays. Make your list. Your spouse make their list, and talk about it, because I think you might be a bit surprised, and it might give you a great foundation to go into this next homeschooling year. I think this is our last podcast, because the one coming out on Friday is going to be a terrific interview with a homeschooling mom in Alaska. So we want to wish you all happy holidays and
stay safe.
Happy New Year, and we'll see you again after New Year's.
Okay, so we like to end it like we always like to end with something
that's
we're
right.
into. That's right. We always gotta end with some. So
sorry,
this week,
can't cut it out.
This week, we had the podcast last week or so where we talked about, we were doing some woodworking projects with the wife when I had some leftover wood. And so this week we've been into with the oldest is woodworking and power tools. Oh yeah.
With a 5-year-old.
With a 5-year-old. So I had some scrap wood, and we've been doing the Lego Advent calendar. I think we've mentioned that. And every night she's been playing with Legos every night, and she's just been getting a kick out of it. And so I took some extra wood, had 2 pieces of wood that were kind of basically the same length. And I found a couple hinges that I wasn't using. And so I built her we were going to build this kind of foldable, collapsible house. And maybe I'll take a picture of it. We'll put it on the Instagram and maybe on the Facebook page. But I said, okay, let's see what she's willing to do. And so I found some screws, and I had the hinges, and I started the screws in, and we have this little handy little screw gun.
It's a little Black
and Decker type. Not one of the big ones that's, a huge
It's
screw
like
gun.
a little cordless, it's the one that my Grammy has and that she actually gave us for Christmas one year. It's like a real small.
Yes, it's a little small thing that kind of gets stored away in like a utility closet, and you pull it out to hang a picture.
Yeah, that
so
kind of thing.
I pulled that out, and I had all the bits, and I showed her how to use it. And she was able to turn it on, and I had her put the bits in. I showed her the ends of the bits were different, and I pulled out some additional screws that had different, did different head configurations and things like. I had a star pattern, I had a Phillips, a flathead, and so I was showing her the different ways. And then I started it in by hand, and then I had her, and I held her hand, and I helped her, and she got to screw it into herself. And all screws went all the way in, and she was just like her eyes and her mouth, and she was smiling ear to ear, and she was loving it.
And you sanded it first too.
Oh yeah, and we got some sandpaper, and so I sanded the edge. So we sanded the edges. I sanded one board, and she sanded the other. And then she gave me her board, and I finished sanding it because otherwise it wasn't really perfect. But she got the experience of smoothing it out and putting it together. And then once we screwed it together, it's kind of this foldable kind of, if you can imagine like a book, but it's longer. So it's like a long book.
Yeah, it's 2 1x6s that are both about a foot long.
About a foot long, yeah. And so they kind of folded it together. And then what we did is I got the Sharpie out, and I said, okay, this is a house. And she goes, oh, this is going to be perfect. It's going to be perfect. I said, what do you want in your house? And she goes, I want a door right here. So I drew a door, and then a window, and then the kitchen and everything. And we let that dry and and then we went and painted it. And then we painted the other side. So it was the reverse of the inside. So we put the windows and the doors where they should be. And then we painted the exterior of the house and everything. And now it's this little foldable, silly little construction house. And she's so proud of it because she was able to make it. And she did all the painting, and she assembled it. And it was just a couple screws and stuff. So I think the moral of what we're saying is don't be afraid to start to introduce your kids into things that, most people would not let kids play with, as long as you're there and you're helping them along the way. She was over the moon building this thing, and she's been super proud of it, and she's pulled it out every night, and she does her Lego house that she built, and she's telling me all these other things she wants to put onto it. She wants to put on a roof and all this other things. And I'm thinking inside my head, I'm like, I don't know if I have enough hinges for that, but
she's already getting prepared for a wife. Okay, we got this project done. Now I want you to do this other thing.
Oh, yes.
And I want to make it bigger, and I want
Daddy, you need to go mow the lawn. You need to go paint this room for me. I'm like, well, why can't you go do it? So anyway, play with some wood, play with some power tools. I think it was a good experience for her, and I think it's something that I'll be doing a little bit more in the, maybe in the new year. We'll be doing a little bit more construction. I want to build some raised beds out back, so I think it'll be perfect time for her to be able to kind of do that with me and have the to know that she built something. Yeah. And that she sees it every day and she can play with it. I think she has a little bit more, she just has a little bit more, has more meaning to it to her than if it was just like another toy, especially in the holiday season. She keeps going back to the foldable crappy wood house that we built and, ignoring other toys that were Melissa and Doug, eat your heart out, So, and I think she also likes it because we did it together.
Yep.
And it's something we can.
She was so proud of it.
She was so proud of it. So I encourage you guys to make some toys. Get out there, do some woodworking, and play with power tools. Don't let the kids play with a compound miter saw, but a little hand screw. Oh, and the other thing too is we talked a little bit about electricity. Gave us a little opportunity to talk about electricity and the power of that, because I gave her just a basic screwdriver, and I said, okay, now screw it in by hand, and she was like, and then we did it by the screw gun, and she saw that. I said, this has a lot of built-in power. Think about how much effort it was for you to turn the screw. That is stored within this screw gun. She was like, whoa. So she kind of got the idea of that there's storable energy. Things take energy. So we had a little bit of opportunity to kind of play with that. So a little STEMmy went to my heart a little bit. So it was nice. So hopefully you guys give you guys some ideas in the new year.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
Happy homeschooling!